Born in Myrtle Creek in 1947, Rick Abrahamson and his family moved to McMinnville in 1963 after his sophomore year of high school. Rick decided to prepare for the upcoming basketball season by competing on Mac High's very first cross-country team, due in large part to the recommendation of head basketball coach Eldor Beisch. It not only got Rick into better shape, but it was a great way to meet friends as the new kid in town. Most of the kids on the team were basketball players, so Rick quickly fit in. That basketball season would prove to be difficult for the Grizzlies, as they went on to a record of 7 wins and 7 losses. However, it was a good learning experience because most of their talent were juniors and sophomores who were all trying to get acclimated into the Grizzlies' offensive and defensive strategies. Rick and the young Grizzlies showed a lot of promise, and in the spring, Rick continued his good play for loyal Scooter Rich's baseball team.
Rick had good baseball skills. Rick played shortstop for me in baseball. Had a couple scouts talk to me about his range because he was a great fielder, long-legged, gangly, and still good strength.
Rick capped off his baseball career with 2 straight all-league selections as a junior and senior. Prior to moving to McMinnville, Rick played on an American Legion team as a freshman in high school that eventually went on to play in the American Legion World Series. But it was in basketball where Rick, who is now the starting guard, would begin to really shine as a senior.
Rick Abrahamson ruined my high school basketball career. I was short, I was not very fast, and I couldn't jump. But I was going to get to play a little bit of varsity basketball. And Rick came in from Myrtle Point, and I immediately headed for the bench. And that's where I watched him play for 2 years. But it was not so bad because I had the best seat in the house to watch one of the best basketball players in the state. He was a great competitor. You know, Rick was not didn't have stunning speed, and he wasn't. Didn't have the greatest, just raw athletic ability in terms of speed and jumping and so forth. But he was a great competitor and just a great player.
But he worked so hard at being able to dribble the ball, whether it's left hand, right hand, behind the back. He was a great passer of the basketball.
He had a long jump shot, and he could dribble behind his back. And nobody could dribble behind your back in the 60s. He was the first person we saw who could smoothly go from one side to the other and go behind his back, keep the ball away from people.
I coached 41 years of varsity basketball, and you very seldom get guys that can drive to a spot, elevate over people, and knock down the jumper. Well, a Chris Winkler and a Rick Abrahamson could do those type of things, I mean, they elevate. I mean, most guys, you have to have somebody penetrate and kick the ball to them before they become a shooter. But these 2 guys could elevate over people, so it makes them pretty special. You'd love to have a couple of those every year.
He was a pleasure to watch play basketball, and a good friend and a great new member of the community. He and his family.
Rick had an incredible year, leading the team in assists and was second in scoring with 16 points per game, which earned him an All-State selection and the league's Most Valuable Player award. He led the high-powered offense, which scored a state-best 75 points per contest to a much-improved 12-1 record and into the state playoffs for the first time in several years. The Grizzlies came up short of the state championship in the 1965 tournament, which was played on MacArthur Court, Eugene. During the tournament, the University of Oregon had the chance to see Rick play, and as a result, they eventually gave him a partial basketball scholarship. So after graduating from McMinnville High School, the National Honor Society member moved to Eugene to join the Ducks. Growing up in Southern Oregon, Rick had been a Ducks fan since a boy, and now he would spend the next 4 years playing basketball for them under head coach Steve Belko. Though Rick would flourish as a student athlete, the next 4 seasons would be a little rough for the Ducks, who never finished any season above 500. After leading the freshman team in scoring, Rick was coming into his own as an all-around shooting guard who truly excelled at defense. He was always assigned to guard the opponent's best perimeter player in each and every game. As a result of his outstanding freshman year, Rick's partial scholarship was increased to a full ride. Rick went on to be a 3-year starter for the Ducks and was team captain as a senior. As the captain, Rick provided the type of steady leadership that allowed the Ducks to develop into a quality team. By the end of his senior year, Abrahamson helped lead the University of Oregon to a first-place finish at the Far West Classic. After graduating from the University of Oregon with a business degree in 1969, Rick was pleasantly surprised when drafted into the NBA by the Phoenix Suns. The Suns were in need of a playmaking defensive specialist like Rick. However, after only a week of training camp playing alongside NBA greats like Connie Hawkins and Paul Silas, Rick had to leave tryouts due to his ROTC commitments at the University of Oregon. Rick answered the call to duty by serving as an Army lieutenant assigned to a heavy artillery unit.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear.
With the conflict raging in Southeast Asia, Rick seemed destined for a tour in Vietnam. That is until he was given an opportunity to try out for the All-Army basketball team. He trained hard for 6 months, and after starting with a field of 88 soldiers, Rick was one of the final 12 to make the team. However, at that time, the military decided to combine all the branches of service into an all-armed forces team, which would allow only 12 total spots. Abrahamson came within 1 spot of making the team, only to be edged out by future coaching legend Mike Krzyzewski. But this was by design. The officers in charge of athletics saw that Rick's athleticism and passing ability could be put to better use in a different sport. The sport was team handball, which was new to America but widely popular in Europe and other parts of the world, and the Army was intending on creating the very first American Olympic team compiled completely of soldiers. So in the fall of 1970, Rick tried out for the handball team in North Carolina at the request of his superiors. Out of a field of 50 soldiers who were all former Division I college basketball players, only 7 of them would be chosen, with 5 more added later from other branches to represent all of America in less than 2 years at the 1972 Munich Summer Olympics. For the next year and a half, Rick's life was consumed by handball. Over a span of 14 months, the team made 11 trips to Europe in order to compete in various competitions. In 1971, the United States defeated Canada for America's first ever team handball gold in the Pan American Games, building the team's confidence and qualifying them for the Olympics. America was far behind in this sport dominated by Europeans, but the team was doing their best to catch up fast, and with the 1972 Summer Games in Munich approaching, America was ready to take on the challenge. In the event, the Munich Olympics were marred by a horrific act of terror that ended in the murders of 11 Israeli athletes. With the world in mourning over the shocking events in West Germany, the Olympic Committee decided that the best way to honor the fallen athletes was to preserve the spirit of the Games by continuing the competitions.
Julie Domey, the head of the Olympic Organizing Committee, has announced that the Olympics will go on. As of this hour, the Olympics, the Games of the 20th Olympiad, will continue.
As play resumed, Rick and his teammates played inspired handball as the U.S. team shocked the handball world with an upset victory over top-ranked Spain. Rick led his team to another impressive result in a 1-point loss to Denmark in the final seconds of the game. The Americans also played eventual gold medal winners Yugoslavia closer than any other opponent at the Games, losing by a margin of only 4 points. In the end, after only a year and a half in the sport, Rick was the 3rd leading scorer at the 72 Olympics and had helped lead the USA to a number 12 world ranking.
We didn't have awards within the team. There was no most valuable player or best defense or anything like that. But I could honestly say, I think to a man, if we would have had a vote, Rick would have been our most valuable player. I mean, he was our leading scorer, 72 Olympics, 76 Olympics. Our offense was devised to try to get him as many shots as possible, or one of us coming off a pick for him to try to get a shot. I mean, he was good. He was very good, very, very good. He was a good competitor, was a good teammate. He was the kind of guy that after practice was over, often people had scattered at wherever, and he'd stay after and take more shots and work on more moves and stuff. So, yeah, he was definitely our most valuable player and by far our best offensive player.
Following the Olympics, Rick was considered to be one of the best handball players in the world and could have played professionally in Europe. Instead, he chose to pursue the sport at home in America while devoting time to his career in business administration. In 1973, Rick began his services on the United States Olympic Committee Athletes Advisory Council and would later be elected to the Board of Directors and Executive Board. Later that year, he was one of the few Olympic athletes selected to testify before the President's Commission on Olympic Sports, which eventually resulted in the revision of the USA Olympic Committee and the adoption by Congress of the Amateur Sports Act. By 1974, Rick earned the title of team captain, which is a position he held for the rest of his handball career. In the Pan American Games in Argentina the following year, despite a very hostile crowd and several death threats, Rick led America to its 2nd team handball gold medal. He also competed for the USA in the World Cup Games in East Berlin that year. In 1976, Rick was a member of the national championship handball team, the New Jersey Jets, as well as the 5th leading scorer in the 1976 Olympic Games in Montreal, while helping America to a 10th place finish. In the following years, Rick continued to play on the U.S. national team and was a player coach for Team Handball at the USA Olympic Sports Festival in Colorado, where his team took gold in 1979, followed by a silver medal finish at the Pan American Games later that year. Despite these successes, the Americans did not qualify for the 1980 Olympic Games in Moscow. In 1980, after serving 2 terms as the vice president of USA Team Handball, Rick retired from playing the sport he helped bring to America 10 years earlier. Since that time, he has put his business degree to great use, embarking in one venture after another, while serving on countless committees, all with the same goal of the betterment of Olympic athletes and the promotion of team handball in the United States. In recent years, Rick has enjoyed watching his 2 daughters follow in his footsteps athletically. His oldest just finished 4 years of soccer at the University of Oregon, and his youngest is a freshman soccer player at Washington State. Whether through coaching City League basketball or by voluntarily writing the chapter on team handball for the widely used Encyclopedia of Physical Education, Fitness, and Sports, Rick has always made the time to give back to athletics. He is without a doubt one of the founding fathers of the sport in this country. When it comes to USA Team Handball, Rick Abrahamson literally wrote the book.